And I was like, what does that mean? And then, ouch, paw? And then she came over to me and she put her left paw in my hand. And I was like, okay. And I looked between her toes and she had a foxtail stuck between her toes. This was the stranger in her paw. She's got a mat between her toes.
So it's not just Bunny who can do these amazing things. I know that video was my inspiration for getting started with my learners. And my cat Jasper, she was able to request medication multiple times after having an eye procedure with eyes, help, or some combination of that. And it's not all medical related. There's lots of fun examples too. One of my favorite early ones was with Scout, a Catahoula mix, who would repeatedly combine water and bone. Took us a little while to figure out what she wanted, but it was ice cubes. And so she got an ice cube button and was able to advocate for herself in that way. So it really is amazing how creative they can be, even with a limited vocabulary. All right, so how do we begin? For those of you who are just starting off on your button teaching journey here, our first step is modeling. And even if you haven't received your buttons yet or haven't unpacked them yet, you can be doing this verbally. Talk to them all the time. Practice being specific with your language, consistent as possible. For those of you who speak multiple languages, fantastic. You can pick and choose whatever you're using most, or you can adapt things a little bit and avoid homonyms, avoid sounds or words, concepts that sound too similar to each other. Calvin ran into this with mad and dad and wound up switching to Mad and Calvin, his first name, instead of dad that he went by, to avoid that homonym. So those of you who speak other languages, great, you've got an easy hack to change things up there. So do whatever comes naturally to you. And since modeling is how we teach our learners what these concepts mean, the more you can say yes to their presses and pick buttons for which you can easily say yes and follow through, the better. We want to capture their excitement, their enthusiasm around the board, and teach them that this is an amazing tool that they now have available to them. So there's 3 simple steps to modeling, and then I'll hit play on this video for you. The first is press a button, something that you can immediately and frequently follow through on and say yes to. And then step 2 is follow through. Show them the meaning of the word by making it happen. And then step 3 is repeat. Lots and lots of repetition, especially early on. So that's where I have a video for you with Kelly and her learner Delmer. This is the first 24 hours that they had buttons in their household. So I want you to see how much she's pressing all throughout the day.
Puzzle. Outside. 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 Puzzle. Outside. Pet. Puzzle. Outside. Outside. Pet. Puzzle. Puzzle.
Yes. Puzzle. More puzzle?
Puzzle. Puzzle. Outside. 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 Puzzle. Outside. Puzzle. Outside. Outside. Outside.
So again, it's a lot of repetition, especially early on, while we're helping them understand that the button has a consistent outcome each and every time. And take advantage of those accidental presses. They are great opportunities to show them that consistency and to show them that they can also make these things happen. We'll talk about target training, kind of helping them figure out how to press as well, but those accidental presses are fantastic. And sometimes a few accidental presses is all that they need to realize, oh, I can do this too. And I have a note at the bottom real quick that this, the speed at which they pick up button pressing and pressing independently, it has no bearing on their long-term success. It doesn't mean that they're less intelligent, that you're doing anything wrong. Sometimes they just need a lot of modeling, a lot of us showing them, hey, this is worth your while, and as well as tweaking what buttons are down. We'll talk about that in our next few slides, but keep at it, keep modeling. Think about buttons that you can ideally press 10 to 15 times a day so that you can really show them, hey, this has an outcome that's consistent and that you want to be happening as well. So maybe you're not home throughout the day, no big deal. Maybe you don't even have time throughout the evening or in the morning to be modeling, frequently for your learner. That's all right. Rapid modeling can help as well. So this is an example of rapid pairing or rapid association between pressing a button and having the outcome appear. So in this case, it's with food. This was from our food modeling challenge back in February, and it's with Kelly and a different learner, Nushka, this time. Nushka's new to the buttons, and so Kelly's working with a snack button. So notice how she's pressing snack with the food itself. That way we're also getting the residual smell and that association on the button. So Nushka's learning that button gets pressed, that sound is heard, the food is appearing on the button and then coming to Nushka. It's also being rewarded a little bit away so that Nushka's then turning back to Kelly and back to the button, asking for more. And it gets to the point where, especially after a few days of doing this in a row, just for 30 seconds even, maybe you do this before their mealtime or something like that. It can be snack, it can be eat, it could be a play button, and then you're playing with them, particularly if you have a play motivated cat. It doesn't have to be food, just something that you can rapidly reward with, rapidly pair with that button press so that they're really getting quickly, oh, that button equals that. And when you stop pressing it for a moment, maybe you even intentionally pretend to get distracted by your phone, or maybe you don't have to pretend. Maybe you get a text message and you're like, oh, hold on, let me respond. A lot of our learners will then come over and be like, what are you doing? Let me try to hit that, or nose it, or stare at it, try to interact with the button in some way. And that's when you can reinforce that, press it. When in doubt, help them out, press that, reinforce. And that can really get them to realize, oh, I want to press this button. I want the outcome here. Hopefully that helps with thinking about it. I see some typing, so I'll make sure that we answer any questions that come through here too. Great question, Michelle. We will dive into that. No worries. Really great question. So how do we know what buttons and words to start off with? How do we choose? We want to set ourselves up for success, and we want to start with 2 or 3 buttons, more than one, to help them realize that different buttons mean different things. 2 to 3 tends to be the sweet spot generally for most learners, but that doesn't mean every single learner. The idea, though, is we just want more than one so they realize that different buttons mean different things, and we don't want to overwhelm them. But we've definitely had examples of learners who have started with more than 3 and have done great. They're all individuals, right? When we're going through and discussing things today, know that these are the general best practices that have been developed over the last, close to 5 years with researchers, with thousands of households, but there's still nuance. They're all individuals, and you know your learner and your household best. You're the experts in them. So if at any point I say something and you're like, that's not going to work for us, no big deal. Let us know, and we'll figure out, what variation might make more sense for you. And I'll show you in continuing education where you can get help as things arise, if things arise. All right, so our starting buttons ideally should be motivating and meaningful to your individual learner or learners, easy and convenient to model immediately, and concrete or actionable. The more easy it is for us to demonstrate and follow through with, the faster they tend to get it. And because the soundboard itself is an abstract tool that they're learning how to use, if we start with really abstract concepts, that can set them back. So the more action you can take, typically the better. So that's where our examples of starting buttons come in. Maybe it's a general play. Maybe it's a specific toy. Totally up to you and up to your learner, your household, what makes sense. For my kittens, I began with eat, pets, and play. Something all very actionable, a food-related one, a play, more action, active button, and then an affection button, basically. Sometimes brush is a better answer. Sometimes they like a brush more than pets. Sometimes adding both, if they like both and they're not as food motivated, can be a good option. Instead of starting with play for my border collie, Adora, I began with ball specifically because ball is life for her. But she has a general play, and my kittens are now working on specific buttons. Outside is on here as a common starting button, but that doesn't mean that you should feel pressured to start with outside. Totally an option, but if you live on the 10th floor, it's not going to be easy and convenient for you to model. So it's going to be tough. It might set you back. It might be frustrating for your learner or for you. If they already have a dog door or a pet door and can let themselves in and out, it's not going to be motivating. They already have a way. They don't need to press a button for it. So maybe consider starting with something else and adding an outside button down the line. Michelle gets it. Hashtag ball is life. Yes. And John, there should not be a video playing right now aside from depending on what view. Sometimes people can see me talking, sometimes not. It really just depends. If you are able to, I'll show you where you can find the recording that should have me at the top of the screen, at least in a little bubble. I can stop sharing and demonstrate more in a little bit too, if that's helpful. So Michelle asked, I read in the intro packet that came with the starter kit that we shouldn't use treat as the first button. Is this rapid modeling different than doing that? So you are not wrong. The initial materials that came with the buttons explicitly said, don't start with food related things. We were concerned early on that they would think that all the buttons equaled food, that they would only want to press for a food outcome. It would be, too confusing for them. But what we found over the years with the research and the time is that it's so motivating for our learners. And the majority of them will figure out ways to try to ask for food anyway. So why not just give them a button explicitly for it? And Alexis is completely on board with this now too. Initially, particularly because of the research, they didn't want it to be confounded by food buttons. So that's the only reason Bunny didn't have them initially. We totally recommend, as you can hear, starting with food buttons now. I began with my cats that way, all of them. And at the time when I began 4.5 years ago with Jasper, she had leukemia. That's unfortunately why she's no longer with us and why I have my 2 visually impaired kittens who are now kind of her legacy. But for Jasper, the vets wanted her to gain weight. They wanted her to eat more. So all of the literature that I got with my first set of buttons said, never start with food. It's going to make them obsessed. They're going to want to eat more. And I was like, that actually sounds great. She's not going to be with us very long. And I want her to gain weight. The vets want her to gain weight. Let's do it. So I began with food buttons and it motivated her. It got her to use them. And a funny thing happened. It became far less valuable for her. It became, because when she did have an appetite, when she was feeling well, she would eat to the point of regurgitation. She had a very unhealthy relationship with food as a tiny feral kitten. And once she realized that she had a food button that she could press, I would say yes to, and I would follow through on that press consistently. It became less of a limited resource. It became less valuable to her. It got to the point where she would willingly leave food in her bowl. She stopped regurgitating. She would go and press all done and tell me when she was done eating so that I could put it away and it would be fresh for her to just let me know when she wanted it brought back out. So that doesn't mean that food buttons are appropriate for every single household. Still be cautious of, dietary restrictions, resource guarding in your household if you think it's going to create too much competition between multiple learners. But that's also where maybe having separate boards can be helpful so that they're not, guarding a food button from one another or something like that. But yeah, it's an incredible motivator. We don't want to restrict them. And as long as the only button that you're responding to with food are ones that are food related, it shouldn't be confusing for them. So that's where kind of our target training, starting off with a button that does say something like treat, snack, eat, doing that rapid pressing, following through, or working specifically on them, pawing it, nosing it, whatever. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes here. But that can be incredibly helpful and motivating for them. Thank you, Michelle. And then again, in our last column here, pet/scritches, some kind of affection button. Brush is great there too. And let me go back actually to the puzzle option just below eat/food/snack, especially with having some international folks. I know this does not always translate. So where is that puzzle? There it is. So puzzle just refers to any food dispensing toy in my household. You can call it, whatever you want for any of these things. So here's kind of a cat kibble puzzle. You can kind of see where they can practice pawing the kibble out of different textures, different surfaces. And that I actually think helped Katie, my visually impaired cat, learn how to press the buttons, because she started pawing one of these when it was empty. She started pawing at this and looking at me insistently like, why is this empty? And so I brought a button right over. You're totally great to pop a button out, move it where it's relevant. I pressed that right next to this, and she was like, okay. So I pressed it, filled food a few times, then waited until she pressed the button instead of this, and then gradually worked it back into her hex tiles, her full soundboard there. But I think this is a good way, the puzzles, things like this, here's a little kibble mousy puzzle as well, are great ways for them to practice their paw dexterity and to practice their paws as a tool and realizing, oh, I can ask for things with my paws. And that translates really well. So puzzles are great for that reason, but also because it can get really old really quick if you're just hearing like a kibble button repeatedly and you're like, okay, here's a kibble, here's another kibble, here's another kibble. So something like a puzzle that you fill in and takes them 15, 20 minutes to work through can buy you time to go about your day, to do some work, some peace and quiet, depending. Neighbor friend. And so Bernie right now is providing a really great example of why abstract concepts are tough to start off with. He's no longer a beginner. He's been at it since pretty much August, pressing regularly, I'd say, since September, but didn't really kind of find his sweet spot until this year. But he just flopped, which is usually his style of pressing. He just flopped on neighbor and friend. How do I respond to that? What is a concrete, actionable step I can take? There are neighbor cats that wander around. They do kind of acknowledge each other from a distance while he's supervised inside of a fence. Is that what he's referring to? Maybe. I don't know, though. And there's not anything I can do to, make a neighbor cat appear in this moment. So that's where waiting for the abstract concepts until they're a bit more advanced, so that you're not like, what am I supposed to do? Because you don't want them to get frustrated or give up on pressing if they're not getting the outcome that they want or expect. So that's why, again, step 3 here, or number 3 here, concrete and actionable is important. All right, so to summarize, 3 buttons, 3 hex tiles, go. Even if you haven't decided where you want the soundboard to live, that's okay. You can just move it with you. You can pop a button out, bring it with you. If you know you're going to be snuggled on the couch for the evening, bring your pet's button, cuddles together, whatever it is in your household. You can bring that with you and intermittently just press it while you're snuggling on the couch together. Because who's going to want to get up, go over to the board and press that? I know I'm not going to want to. So set yourselves up for success. Ideally, long-term, having the soundboard set up somewhere that's centrally located, easy for you to get to, easy for your learner to get to, that tends to be best. But, until they work up to a little bit more independence from you, and until you decide maybe where that ideal place is, just bring it with you. Or maybe you work upstairs in an office much of your day, bring it up into the office and then bring it back downstairs when you're back downstairs for the night. All right. So the other piece of all of this is, when you maybe have too many presses that are difficult to say yes to, your learner's pressing independently. That's fantastic. We want that. But sometimes they're doing it more than we can say yes and follow through. So that's where thinking about buttons that buy you time, like the puzzle button, things that are easy to say yes to, having lots of easy to say yes to options on the board, but then thinking about abstract concepts as well to help create maybe some boundaries. So that's where we can think about pairs, because with abstract concepts, if we can model them in opposition to one another, that can make them a little bit easier for them to understand. So more and all done could be added as a pair to the board, yes and no, or now and later. So thinking about things that you can model in contrast to one another. And when you think about following through with more or yes or now, they press outside. Yes, we're outside now. You can take action. You can follow through with that. Same with more eat. Yes, now let's do it. But say they press outside when you're in the middle of a meeting. Outside all done. No, we can go later. And then you go back to your meeting and nothing happens. That's a lot harder for them to understand. So that's why thinking about adding a pair at a time when you get to the abstract concepts can be really useful. Thinking about emotions in this way too, a positive emotion button like happy that you're modeling in contrast to a negative one like mad or sad or frustrated. And you can always be verbally modeling these, practicing talking about these things to your learners well before you put them down on the board. Yeah, and maybe if you wait a little bit longer to add time concepts, now, soon, and later could even be added together. Today versus tomorrow, safe versus concerned. So again, just paying attention to how you're talking to your learners and starting to think about maybe some natural categories that can come out of that. So hopefully that helps. And we do have our mentorship calls that are free to attend. Would love to have you. I'll show you where to find those in just a few minutes here that continue exploring all of these great details. We have the question, my dog presses the treat button when I am holding it in my hand, but when it's in the hex tile, she doesn't press it. We've just started to use buttons. That is pretty normal to me. Yeah, that, especially at the beginning, that's something I've experienced a lot of as well. And when we think about the picture of us holding it, what that looks like to our learners versus it being moved to the floor, that's different muscles involved. It's, different motor skills. It physically looks different. It might even feel different depending on it moving under, in our hand versus on the floor. So that's totally normal for them to be like, whoa, this is different. Are you sure you want me to do the same thing? Once they get it though, they'll get it. And this is also where target training can help. So target training is useful for them connecting the dots, for realizing that they can press the buttons anywhere, whether it's on the wall with their nose potentially, if you want to practice a nose target, or on the floor. They can help them press with multiple paws. My border collie loves to use her whole body. My cat Bernie, though, you saw him, he's a flopper. He uses his shoulder, and for the most part, he's pretty accurate. I can understand him. He's not frustrated. So I think that's great. Let them develop their pressing style if you can, unless you have a specific need for like a nose press for the wall mount. Let them figure it out. And some are combo pressers. Some are nose and paw pressers. So we have a few different links and resources for you here, specifically around target training. And let's talk a little bit more about them. So Anna asked, or Anna Maria asked, are we supposed to be holding it in our hand before putting it in the hex tile? That is certainly an option. You don't have to be, but that is a shortcut that I recommend. And the first one that's linked there, the paw targeting tutorial with Alexis and Bunny, a shortcut from that video that you can do if your learner already knows how to give you a high five, just pop the button out, put it in the palm of your hand, cue them to give you a high five. And then in this case, it's a play button. I would then pick up a toy and offer to play with my learner. And even if they just do a little, they don't press it fully, that's okay. Help them out. When in doubt, help them out so that it is being pressed fully. They're not getting frustrated and they realize, oh, this is worthwhile. let me figure out how to actually do this. So same thing if they already have maybe a nose touch cue. Put it in the palm of your hand, cue them to give you that nose touch, and then follow through once it's pressed. Shake or paw, same thing. Go ahead and cue that and then follow through. And again, this can be play, and then you follow through with play. It can be food, and you follow through with that. Totally up to you. The next two that are listed, the cat school button pressing tutorial and the button targeting tutorial that is the third option that's with Sarah and her cat, Justin Bieber. Though these are cat specific, they're also great for any smaller learner or any learner who's working on the weight shift to press. What some of you may already be observing or will observe soon is that your learner realizes, all right, something great happens when this button is pressed, but how do I make it happen? So if they're staring it down really intensely, if they're batting at the top, if they're tapping the sides, that's where these videos can really help with getting them to shift their weight. People just leave them on the floor the whole time, press them a few times, and the learners have an accidental press and they're like, oh, great, let me do this on purpose. They're all different. They're all individuals. Hopefully that helps with thinking about some different options, and feel free to watch those videos when you have a chance, whichever ones are relevant or helpful for you, if needed. Not all of them need the target training, but it is helpful for that precision piece and to build the confidence too for those that need it. For me, my personal preference is modeling for a few weeks and then starting to work on the target training if they need the help. Yeah, absolutely. So here's even more resources for you all. Within community.fluent.pet, where we are right now for watching this, we've got tons of different helpful things for you. This community's been around for 4.5 years, so there's tons of info. If you want in-depth breakdown of everything, here's your step-by-step on start button teaching. FAQs, you've got a question in the middle of the night. There's 41 different FAQs here. The bootcamp section, this is just for folks like you who have been through bootcamp. If it would be helpful for you to attend another or to have a family member attend, would love to have you back. Feel free to RSVP for another. You can also switch upcoming to past and find recordings of previous bootcamps. Looks like today's will be up as soon as we finish. And then I mentioned a little bit about our free mentorship calls. So we've got some great ones, one coming up right after this. If you want more info about modeling, that is with Janine, who we call our modeling queen, our button speak queen. She is so specific and precise with a huge vocabulary of ways of talking to her dog and cats. Just very, very fascinating to hear her interact. But lots of different fun topics taught by different instructors here that have all had success with their learners. And then here's where you can find a link to that self-study learning center, the pod targeting tutorials that we linked in the chat there that Irma helpfully put up for you all. If you are the type that wants to have a plan and know where things are going, soundboard planning tool, take advantage of this. And then if you want more in-depth info, up to date on what's going on with the company, as well as different options from our mentorship instructors, discussion and chat is for you all to ask any questions that you have too, or share wins, struggles, updates, anything like that. All right, one last thing I want to show you, although this whole discussion portion is fantastic, show off your soundboard. If you are looking for inspiration from others, there are as many soundboard layouts as there are households out there. So up to you. You can see lots of different options. This one's cool because it's wall mounted but angled. And they did the plexiglass so that they would not have as many holes in their wall after having to patch before moving from my last home. Yeah, I love an option to not just hammer them directly into the wall. Here's that soundboard planning tool in action, excuse me. Here is a kind of island style option of a layout. There's lots of cockpit style though. That's what you'll see plenty of. One thing I like to highlight from Sasha's example here, because again, we want to think about a central location, easy for our learners to get to, easy for us to get to model. This is a nice space-saving design with it tucked out of the way, but Sasha has still left enough room for her learners to get behind the board and press that way, so that they can have the option of watching her to press. That's very, very important for a lot of our learners. And then here's one of my favorite cat boards, huge advanced learner, Duke Cat. She's a senior kitty. She also has cancer, so comfort is key for her. So she's got this nice cushy walkway. She loves to nap on the board, so there's lots of nap zones built in, and she can basically wake up, stretch, and press exactly what she wants. Because you'll see some of them start to nap on the board as a bit of progress, and showing that they see it as a valuable place to be. And some of them will even just start napping near what they want to do next, so that as soon as they wake up, they're ready to press and go. It's so fun to watch them develop all those skills. Thank you, Irma, for sharing all of that. All right, one more resource to share with you all. So we also have the Let's Get Them Pressing course. This is a 4-week cohort-based class. There's live coaching as well as asynchronous material that I helped contribute to. This is taught by Diane with NeuroDog training and guest instructed by Alexis with Bunny. And there is 25% off if interested, just for folks who have attended Bootcamp. So that code is in the chat for you. Here's some of the great topics that are included. And then if any of you all are realizing that you need more buttons or hex tiles or anything like that, we also have a 15% off coupon code for you. It's good for the next 24 hours on everything at fluent.pet. And then if you have any feedback for us, always looking to improve, we've got a feedback link. We'd love to hear from you there as well. All right, y'all. So open up for more Q&A. Is there anything that I can further clarify? Anything that we didn't get to that would be helpful for you? No pressure, of course. This is not your only opportunity to get help. But feel free to raise your hand or use the chat box. Or there's a Q&A section too. I'm not picky. So let me know how I can help. I can talk about buttons all day, as you all are probably realizing. Oh, Michelle, thank you so much. Y'all have had great questions all throughout too. And no pressure to trying to see who is napping behind me because I can hear snoring. It might be Bernie in the box. Oh, Anna, great question, or Anna Marie, I apologize. Does it make a difference on using bright tiles versus neutral tiles? That's one of the, we're not entirely sure. It seems like the location of the buttons themselves, the muscle memory, kind of their motor map, is what they're using a lot of. There's probably a scent element to locating the buttons, especially in my visually impaired animals. I've seen a lot of sniffing to differentiate between buttons. And for my fully blind cat, Jasper, I did have a kitty braille, a lot of textures that I had put across the buttons for her to help differentiate different concepts. And she would feel between them, but I think she primarily used them as scent soakers. And she was able to differentiate and navigate via smell, and perhaps even her own pheromone marking, because I would see her when she was hungry, lick her paw with that, drool, and then put that specifically only on her food buttons. The mom button, even for my visual learners, the mom button lived in my pocket for a day before I put it on the board. The litter button, I put it in clean litter first, let it kind of absorb that scent before putting on the board, things like that, just to help differentiate more. So the bright tiles versus neutral, not as much. And for me, I kind of am utilizing the colors just for contrast. I also try to have a different layout of buttons, the way the buttons are kind of placed in the hex tiles. I try to have a different layout on every single hex tile. And so for me, again, these are kind of similar colors, but I'm putting different colors and patterns next to each other to help orient for my lower vision learners. But there's people who have fully monochromatic boards, rainbow boards, no hex tiles, and learners are all successful as long as we're not rearranging the location too much, frustrating them. And anytime I am making a board adjustment, I want to give my learners the option of being present. It's their tool, right? I don't want them waking up from a nap or coming in from playing outside and being like, whoa, everything smells, looks, feels different. That's overwhelming. So giving them the option to be present for those changes as well. So personal preference for the tile color. For me, I avoid the super lightest color ones just because they are harder to keep clean in a very high traffic household. Since I have 4 learners essentially wandering, using the board, and then guest boarders and training dogs and all the time too. And asked, what are some examples of what not to have buttons for? Ooh, this is a good question. I don't get this one as much. I think a good general rule is to add concepts that your learner wants to talk about. Things that are interesting for them, not that are only interesting for us or that are potentially commands. I've seen where some people are like, oh, I want to add like a stay button or something like that. And maybe sometimes our learners could tell us to stay potentially, but if we're putting it on the board just to tell them what to do when we're teaching them the soundboard as kind of a two-way communication or way for them to be specific and precise about what they want, that might not get as much use. So also being cautious about nothing too terribly aversive, trying to make sure that they don't associate the board with negative things. So like some really shy, sensitive learners, we want to establish that the board is happy, fun, positive with things that they like and enjoy first. Because say like your ultimate goal is to communicate around pain, discomfort, scary things. That's great. That's so important. And I use the board all the time in that way with my learners. But we had dozens of positive buttons first before adding like the ouch or fearful things. Because we have seen some evidence of learners potentially, maybe, I mean, it's hard to say exactly, but avoiding like an ouch button, or even like there was an example of a terrier who was a belly ouch was being modeled for him a lot when he had a tummy ache. But then he started avoiding his belly button that he was using to request food as a happy thing for a little while. He was like, oh, if belly is ouch, like I don't want to use that. Could there have been other reasons? We don't know. But we don't want them to have a negative association, if that makes sense. We want it to be them to see that they have agency, they have control with the buttons, and not think that the buttons are causing a negative thing to happen to them. I don't know if that was too long of an explanation or made sense, but yeah, great question. He says, my dog wants to play with the hex tile. She grabs it with her mouth. I don't want her to do that because I don't want her to avoid them because of it. So how to tell her no from biting the hex tile without stopping her from using the buttons? Fantastic question as well. And I usually try to cover this. So thank you for prompting this. Similar to a cat scratching the board, a dog trying to chew the buttons, pick up the hex tiles, running around with them in the mouth, it might be worth adding a button specifically for that, a chew button, whatever you may call it, a scratch button for my cat. So give them a button specifically for that need, for that desire. They're telling you with their body language, they're communicating a desire. So give them a button for what it is that they're trying to communicate. Redirect them to that button, press chew, and then give them, a bully stick, a yak cheese chew, an antler, whatever is safe and vet approved for their size, and their stomach and all. Give them a chew, give them an appropriate alternative. I have the scratch button for my cats, and then I also have, apologies to anybody who gets motion sick here, but you can see I've got the cardboard scratcher right there, as well as the pole scratcher, so that I can very quickly redirect my cats to the scratcher when they start digging their claws into the foam instead. So yeah, thinking about behavior as information and how we can maybe translate that to the board. And there is a really great viral button video lately with a pup named Radley Barkley, a little pitty mix, who starts to chomp on things in her environment and starts doing the like rah, over threshold groan noises, and then goes over and presses her button that says destroy. And her mom gives her a cardboard box that she's able to shred up. She shreds it into tiny pieces and then takes a nice long nap because she got that need out. They added a button for what her body language was desiring. So I'd be curious to see if that would help. Give her a button. And worst case, if she's fixated on the hex tiles, you can always take just the hex tiles up, maybe use the buttons Velcroed in place or on cardboard, plywood, something like that as an alternative if need be. But I'm optimistic that even just the hex tiles themselves, Velcroed or carpet taped onto the floor might be helpful. And you can see mine is on a yoga mat in part to help reduce the desire because my border collie used to pick up and take them off as well. So let me know. Hopefully that helped. Any additional questions that you all have while we're together today? The more things we can say yes to on the board, the better. Yeah, excellent questions. I don't see any typing at the moment. I'm going to hang out another minute. Don't worry. So don't panic if you are working on articulating your question. But I just want to thank you all so much for being here today, for all of your great questions, for being willing to try something new with your learners, to put yourselves out there like this. Have fun. You know your learner and your household best. You are the experts in them. You've got this. We're here to help as well, every step of the way if you'll have us. But yeah, it's not rocket science. Go with your gut and have fun with it. Thank you all so much again for being here. Thank you always, Irma. Thank you, Calvin. I so appreciate your help here at FluentPet. I hope everyone has a great rest of your weekend. I do see some typing, so I'm going to hang out. Don't worry. But yeah, goodbye to everybody who I know I want to respect y'all's time. So if you need to run, I totally understand. Thank you. I so appreciate y'all. I can't wait to see all your learner videos and pictures. If any of you all are on social media, Instagram, TikTok, anything like that, feel free. Oh, Christina, great question. I'm not updating as much as I should, but I'm at Positive Behaviors, and I would love to follow you all and your learners too. So Christina asked, how do you model concepts that you don't use every day, like ouch? Great question, and so important. That is one that we are practicing kind of for the long haul. That's where practicing narrating, modeling it whenever the opportunities arise. We hope that you don't have a lot of opportunities to model this one. But for me, I have chronic pain that I deal with. So I'm able to model mom ouch or Morgan ouch a lot. So narrating on myself. When my learners came back from being spayed and neutered, narrating ouch during that time. Anytime I notice a hitch in their step, if I notice a quick whip around and like grab like a bug bite or something like that, I'm narrating ouch in that moment. If they're scratching their ear and I hear a squeak, ear ouch, mom help. And I might come over and try to wipe it out for them. So I'm practicing a lot of help around ouch as well when I know that I can alleviate their ouch for them, so that help is seen as a positive thing. And help, other ways that I'll model that one, it can be fun things like a treat or a toy stuck underneath the furniture or underneath the crate, helping them get that itch in their ear. Maybe they're hitting it with their nail and that's part of why it's uncomfortable. Mom help ear itch. I'll come over and give them a nice massage, show them that those primate hands, those grabby primate hands can be really helpful and useful for them. So practicing things, like ouch and help whenever those opportunities do arise. But you're right, it's not something that you're going to use every day, at least I hope not. But just do your best to be specific, label it in the moment, and then it's up to you. Do you just add the button randomly one day? I waited, knowing that my border collie was getting ready to be spayed. I waited and added the button when she came back from the procedure. Hopefully that's helpful to think about. I see a bit more typing, so I'm hanging out. Don't worry, y'all. Yeah. And the other piece of the ouch that I'll often add, I do find that it's important to work on emotions, narrating emotions otherwise, and making sure that you already have like a mad or a frustrated button on your board before adding ouch, because ouch has become a catch-all emotional pain, emotional frustration button for a lot of our learners over the years, myself included. I was very skeptical about adding emotion buttons and was like, I don't need that. Ouch is way more important. I'll focus on that. And then when my learners were frustrated with me, they would go over and stare me down and press ouch, because I didn't give them any other way to express it. So that can be a helpful thing to think about too. Okay, Jennifer, excellent question too. I'm worried that my dog will continuously spam the play button or similar, which obviously is not ideal for normal working life. How do I reject/redirect her request without ruining the button training? Yeah, so that's where, the more things that you can say yes to, something like puzzle that you can hopefully redirect her to, be like, play later, but puzzle now, or, you can sunbathe on the deck right now, or whatever is appropriate, or chew on a bone while she's relaxing next to you while you work. So thinking about other things that you can say yes to, and then that's where your early abstract concepts like more and all done, or yes and no, or now and later might come in handy, so that you can say, or press like the play later, but eat now, or settle now, or puzzle now, whatever it is that you're offering as an alternative. Yeah, that is a good concern to have. But yeah, as long as you have other things to say yes to, you should be all right. And you can always away from the board too, or move the board out of or further away from where you're working to make it